The transport ship docked with a heavy thud that shook the metal walls. Jake Morrison grabbed his single bag and walked down the ramp into the hangar bay of the Valiant Horizon. The air smelled different here, like metal and something sharp he could not name. His boots made loud sounds on the deck as he looked around at the massive space. Filled with fighters and cargo pods, 3 aliens stood waiting for him near the entrance. They were huge, at least 8 feet tall, with thick, green skin that looked like armor plates. Their heads were long and narrow like a snake, but they walked on 2 legs like humans. Yellow eyes watched him as he approached. Jake had seen pictures of the Corvans before, but seeing them in person was different. They were much bigger than he expected. The one in the middle wore more decorations on his uniform than the others. His voice was deep and rough when he spoke. "You are the human." It was not a question. "I am Captain Vexstar. Welcome to my ship." Jake stopped in front of them and gave a military salute. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison reporting for duty, sir." Captain Vexstar looked at him for a long moment. His yellow eyes moved up and down, studying Jake like he was looking at a broken machine. "You are smaller than I thought you would be?" "Yes, sir," Jake said. He was used to this. At 5 feet 10 inches tall, he was average for a human, but tiny compared to these aliens. "The Galactic Defense Coalition has ordered me to place you with my best squad," the captain continued. "This is squad leader Zethkal." He pointed to the alien on his right. "You will follow his orders." Squad leader Zethkal stepped forward. His skin was darker green than the captain's, with scars running across his face and arms. "A human in Strike Team Alpha." He made a sound that might have been laughter. "The council must think this is funny. The human exchange program is important for relations between our species," Captain Vexstar said, but his tone suggested he did not believe his own words. "Show him to his quarters and begin his training." Zethkal nodded. "Come, human. Try to keep up." Jake followed the squad leader through the corridors of the ship. The ceilings were high to fit the tall Corvans, making Jake feel even smaller. Other crew members stopped to stare at him as they passed. Some pointed and whispered to each other in their own language. Jake understood a few words from his basic training, and none of them were compliments. "Your quarters," Zethkal said. Stopping at a door marked with symbols Jake could not read. "You will stay here when not on duty. Do not wander the ship alone. Many of my crew do not like humans." The room was small and plain, with a bed that was too long for Jake and a metal desk. A small window showed the stars outside. "When do I meet the rest of the squad?" Jake asked. "Now," Zethkal said. "They are waiting in the briefing room." They walked to another part of the ship and entered a room with a large table in the center. 4 more Corvans sat around it, all wearing the same dark uniforms. They looked up when Jake entered, and he could see surprise on their faces. "This is the human," Zethkal announced. "His name is Jake Morrison. He will be joining our squad." The largest Corvan stood up slowly. He was even bigger than the others, with arms like tree trunks. "This is Brackmore," Zethkal said. "My second in command." Brackmore walked around the table and stopped in front of Jake. He was so tall that Jake had to crane his neck to look up at him. "So small?" Brackmore said in broken English. "How does something so tiny fight?" "I manage," Jake replied. "Another." Corvan laughed. This one was thinner than the others, but still much larger than Jake. "I am Tinder," he said. "I have heard humans break easily. Is this true?" "Some of us are tougher than we look," Jake said. The third alien was shorter than the rest, though still taller than Jake. "Kelvas," he introduced himself. "I have studied human anatomy. Your bones are hollow like bird bones, very weak." "Actually, human bones are solid," Jake corrected. "You might be thinking of a different species." Kelvas made an angry sound. "I do not make mistakes about anatomy." The last member of the squad had been quiet until now. She was the only female Corvan Jake had seen, with lighter green skin and fewer scars. "Nixtal," she said simply. "You will not last long here, human." Zethkal sat down at the head of the table. "The human will be assigned to support duties. Communications, equipment maintenance, things that will not require real combat skills." What about training? Jake asked. I was told I would train with the squad. Brackmore laughed loudly. Train? What could you possibly teach us? Humans have been in space for what, 50 years? We have been warriors for thousands. I was thinking more about learning from you, Jake said carefully. There is nothing to learn, Tinder said. Human fighting techniques are primitive. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no speed. How did your species even survive? Jake thought about answering honestly. He could tell them about human wars, about the millions who had died learning how to kill more efficiently. He could explain how humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of violence. But something told him to keep quiet for now. We got lucky, I guess, he said instead. Zethkal opened a folder on the table. These are our current mission parameters. We will be conducting raids on enemy positions in the outer rim. The human will remain on the ship during combat operations. Is that an order from Captain Vexstar? Jake asked. It is an order from me, Zethkal replied. I will not have my squad slowed down by dead weight. Jake felt his face getting hot, but he kept his voice calm. I have combat experience, squad leader. 8 years with Earth Marine Force reconnaissance. Marines, Brackmore said with contempt. We know about your Marines. They fight other humans with primitive weapons. That is not real warfare. The Corvins have never lost a ground battle, Nixthal added. We are the finest warriors in the galaxy. What could a human possibly know about fighting? Jake looked around the table at their confident faces. They were completely sure of themselves, completely certain that humans were weak and useless. He had seen that look before, usually right before someone learned a very painful lesson. You're probably right, he said. I have a lot to learn. Zethkal closed the folder. Report to the armory tomorrow at 0800 hours. Kelvas will show you how to maintain our weapons. Do not touch anything without permission. Understood, Jake said, as the meeting broke up. Jake caught fragments of conversation in the Corvan language. He understood enough to know they were making jokes about him. They found it amusing that the mighty human military had sent them such. A small, weak representative, walking back to his quarters, Jake thought about his orders from Earth Command. He was supposed to learn everything he could about Corvan combat techniques and report back. But he was also supposed to prove that humans could be valuable allies. Looking at the stars through his small window, Jake smiled. He had been underestimated. Before, in his experience, that was usually an advantage. The Corvans thought they knew everything about fighting. They were about to learn that humans had spent a very long time getting good at proving people wrong. Tomorrow would be interesting. 3 days passed slowly on the Valiant horizon. Jake spent his time in the armory with Kelvas, learning about Corvan weapons and equipment. The aliens used energy weapons that were more advanced than anything Earth had developed, but the basic principles were the same: point, aim, fire. Jake had done that plenty of times before. Kelvas seemed to enjoy explaining how superior Corvan technology was to human equipment. Your projectile weapons are so primitive, he said while Jake cleaned a plasma rifle, throwing metal chunks at your enemies. Like cavemen with rocks? Sometimes simple works better, Jake replied, but Kelvas just made a dismissive sound. The other squad members largely ignored Jake when they saw him in the corridors. Brackmore would sometimes flex his massive arms when Jake walked past, as if reminding him how small he was. Tinder made comments in the Corvan language that always seemed to make the others laugh. Nixthal simply looked through him like he was. Not there. Zs single quotes Cole checked on Jake's progress each day but never stayed long. The human is learning, he would tell Kelvas. Then leave without speaking to Jake directly. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Jake was in the armory when the ship's communication system crackled to life. All personnel report to assigned stations. Mandatory combat training exercises begin in 1 hour. Kelvas stood up from the workbench where he had been assembling a weapon. Training day, he said with obvious excitement. Today we show the ship's crew why Strike Team Alpha is the best squad in the fleet. What kind of training? Jake asked. Combat drills with thermal sabers, Kelvas explained. Each squad fights to show their skills. The winning squad gets extra rations and shore leave privileges. Jake had heard about thermal sabers but had not seen them used. Are they dangerous? Kelvis laughed. For humans, probably. They are energy blades that cut through most materials. During training, they are set to practice mode, so they only cause pain instead of cutting limbs off. A Corvan can take many hits before being defeated. A human would probably fall unconscious after one strike. An announcement echoed through the ship. Strike Team Alpha report to Training Bay 7 immediately. They walked through the corridors toward the training area. Other crew members were heading in the same direction, talking excitedly about the upcoming exercises. Jake noticed that many of them looked at him with curiosity, as if wondering what the human would do during combat training. Training Bay 7 was a large circular room with high walls and bright lights. The floor was covered with soft padding, and weapons racks lined the walls. Captain Vextar stood on a raised platform overlooking the training area. Along with several other officers, Jake did not recognize Strike Team Alpha gathered near one of the weapon racks. The thermal sabers looked like metal sticks with handles, but Jake knew they would project energy blades when activated. Zethkal picked up one of the weapons and checked its settings. Today we will demonstrate proper combat techniques, he announced to his squad. The other teams will watch and learn why we are the elite unit on this ship. Brackmore grinned, showing his sharp teeth. Who do we fight first, squad leader? Zethkal looked around the training bay. Several other squads were preparing their own weapons and warming up with practice moves. Then his yellow eyes focused on Jake, and a slow smile spread across his scarred face. I think we should give our new squad member a chance to learn, Zethkal said loudly. His voice carried across the training bay, and conversation stopped, as other Corvans turned to listen. A demonstration of proper technique. All of Strike Team Alpha against the human. Jake felt his stomach tighten. 5 against 1? You wanted to train with us? Zethkal replied. This is how Corvans train. We do not believe in easy fights. Murmurs spread through the crowd of watching aliens. Some seemed amused by the idea. Others looked concerned. A few started placing bets on how long Jake would last. Captain Vextar leaned forward on his platform. Squad leader Zethkal, is this wise? The human has no experience with our weapons. He claims to have combat experience, Zethkal called back. Let him prove it. We will go easy on him since humans are so fragile. Jake looked around the training bay. Every eye was on him now. He could back down, claim he was not ready, ask for more time to learn. That would be the smart thing to do. It would also confirm everything the Corvans believed about humans being weak and cowardly. All right, Jake said. Let's do this. Zethkal picked up a thermal saber and handed it to Jake with exaggerated ceremony. Your weapon, human. Try not to hurt yourself with it. The weapon was heavier than Jake expected, with an unfamiliar balance. He pressed the activation switch and a blue energy blade hummed to life, extending about 3 feet from the handle. The blade gave off heat that he could feel against his face. Remember? Kelvis called out helpfully. In practice mode, it will only shock you when you are hit. The pain will be quite intense, but probably not enough to kill a human. The 5 Corvans spread out in a semicircle around Jake, each carrying their own activated thermal saber. Their blades glowed different colors: red, green, yellow, orange, and purple. Jake found himself in the center of the circle. Holding his blue blade and trying to look more confident than he felt, Zethkal raised his weapon. Begin when ready. We will attack one at a time so the human can see our techniques before he loses consciousness. Jake shifted his stance slightly, getting a feel for the weapon's weight and balance. The thermal saber was different from any blade he had trained with, but the basic principles were the same. Every weapon was just a tool for applying force at a specific point. Brackmore stepped forward first, his massive frame casting a shadow over Jake. I will be gentle, little human, he said with mock kindness. This will only hurt a lot. The crowd of watching Corvans laughed at this. Jake could see Captain Vextar watching intently from his platform, probably wondering if he would need to call medical personnel. Jake rolled his shoulders and adjusted his grip on the thermal saber. 8 years of Marine training had taught him many things, but the most important lesson was this: everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face. The Corvans had a plan. They expected him to be slow, weak, and easy to defeat. Jake had a different plan. He was going to show them exactly how wrong they were about humans. Brackmore raised his thermal saber above his head in a theatrical gesture, clearly intending to deliver a slow, powerful strike that would overwhelm the small human through sheer force. The other Corvans watched with amusement, already planning which one of them would attack next. Jake watched Brackmore's stance and saw all the openings. The big alien was strong and experienced, but he was also overconfident in showing off for the crowd. That was going to be a mistake. "Ready, human?" Brackmore asked, still holding his weapon high. "Ready," Jake replied quietly. What happened next would change everything the Corvans thought they knew about humans. Brackmore brought his thermal saber down in a slow, powerful arc meant to intimidate rather than seriously attack. The big Corvan wanted to put on a show for the crowd, to demonstrate the vast difference between alien strength and human weakness. He expected Jake to stumble backward or try to block clumsily with his unfamiliar weapon. Instead, Jake did something no Corvan had ever seen before. He stepped forward into the attack, moving inside Brackmore's reach before the energy blade could complete its downward swing. The movement was so fast and unexpected that Brackmore's eyes widened in shock. Jake's left hand shot up and grabbed Brackmore's wrist, controlling the arm that held the thermal saber. His right hand maintained his grip on his own weapon while his body twisted in a motion that used Brackmore's size and momentum against him. The technique was called an arm drag in human martial arts, but no Corvan had ever experienced anything like it. Brackmore found himself off balance, his weapon arm trapped, and controlled by the much smaller human. Jake applied pressure to specific points on the alien's wrist and forearm, targeting nerve clusters that existed in most humanoid species. The thermal saber slipped from Brackmore's suddenly numb fingers. Jake caught the falling weapon with his free hand before it hit the ground. In less than 3 seconds, he had disarmed the largest member of Strike Team Alpha and now held 2 thermal sabers. The training bay fell completely silent. Brackmore staggered backward, staring at his empty hand and then at Jake, who stood calmly holding both weapons. The crowd of watching Corvans seemed frozen in shock. What just happened? Someone whispered in the Corvan language. Zethkal's expression changed from amusement to confusion to something that might have been concern. "Brackmore, explain yourself." "I don't know," Brackmore said, flexing his fingers to restore feeling to his hand. "He moves so fast, I have never seen a technique like that." Tinder and Kelvas exchanged glances. They had expected their human squad mate to be defeated immediately, providing entertainment for the crew and confirming Corvan superiority. Instead, their most powerful fighter had been disarmed by movements they did not understand. Jake shifted his stance, now holding a thermal saber in each hand. The weapons felt more balanced this way, and he settled into a fighting position that came from years of Filipino martial arts training. The stance looked nothing like Corvan combat forms. "Continue the demonstration," Captain Vextar called from his platform. His voice was carefully neutral, but Jake could see the alien leader leaning forward with obvious interest. Tinder stepped forward next, his thin frame moving with the fluid grace of an experienced fighter. Unlike Brackmore, he did not underestimate his opponent. "Clever trick, human. But tricks will not save you from real technique." Kelvas moved to flank Jake from the other side. 2 against 1 is more fair," he said. "We will attack together." Jake turned slightly so he could keep both aliens in his field of vision. This was a situation he had trained for many times in Marine close-quarters combat courses. Multiple opponents, confined space, weapons involved. The key was to control positioning and never let them coordinate their attacks. Effectively, Tinder attacked first with a series of quick strikes designed to test Jake's defenses. His thermal saber moved in complex patterns that showed years of training and practice. But Jake did not try to match the alien's technique. Instead, he used footwork to position himself so that Tinder's body blocked Kelvas from attacking When Tinder overextended on a particularly aggressive thrust, Newt stepped to the side and brought his left-hand weapon down on the alien's forearm. The thermal saber, set to practice mode, delivered a painful shock that made Tinder cry out and drop his weapon. Jake immediately swept the fallen saber away with his foot. Keeping it out of reach, Kelvas tried to take advantage of Jake's momentary distraction by attacking from behind. But Jake had been tracking the alien's position and spun to meet the attack. Instead of blocking or parrying, he trapped Kelvas' weapon arm in a joint lock that hyperextended the elbow. The alien made a sound of pain and surprise as his thermal saber clattered to the floor. Jake released the lock and stepped back, now holding 2 weapons while 2 more lay at his feet. "Impossible," Kelvas gasped, clutching his arm. "No one moves that fast." The crowd of watching Corvins erupted in confused chatter. Many of them had never seen their elite warriors defeated so easily. Some argued that the human must be using some kind of technology or trick. Others pointed out that they had all watched the fight clearly, and there was no deception involved. Nixthal, the female member of the squad, had been observing Jake's techniques carefully. "He fights like no warrior I have ever seen," she said. To Zethkal, "His movements are completely foreign." Zethkal nodded grimly. The demonstration was not going as planned. Instead of proving human weakness, it was revealing that they had seriously underestimated their new squad member. "Attack together," he told Nixthal. "Both of us full combat speed." "Squad leader," Nixthal said hesitantly, "perhaps we should reconsider. The human has already proven his point." "No," Zethkal replied firmly. "I will not be humiliated by a primitive human in front of the entire crew. We finish this now." Jake could hear their conversation even though they spoke in low voices. His enhanced hearing, trained through years of reconnaissance work, picked up the tension in their words. They were no longer treating this as a friendly demonstration. They were genuinely threatened by what they had witnessed. "Ready for round 2?" Jake asked calmly. He stood in the center of the training circle, holding 4 thermal sabers in a pattern that defied everything the Corvins understood about weapon fighting. Most warriors could barely handle 1 blade effectively. The human was clearly comfortable with multiple weapons. Zethkal and Nixthal separated to opposite sides of the circle. They activated their thermal sabers and began moving in a coordinated pattern that showed they had fought together many times before. Their technique was polished and professional, the kind of teamwork that came from years of shared combat experience. Jake watched their positioning and recognized the strategy. They were trying to force him to divide his attention between 2 widely separated threats, making it impossible to defend against both simultaneously. It was a good plan against most opponents, but Jake had trained against multiple attackers since his first day in Marine boot camp. Human military doctrine assumed that fights would be chaotic, unfair, and desperate. Marines learned to use every advantage available, including the terrain, the environment, and their opponent's own tactics against them. As Zethkal and Nixthal closed in from opposite sides, Jake did something that violated every principle of Corvin combat philosophy. He threw one of his captured thermal sabers directly at Nixthal's feet. The weapon clattered across the padded floor, forcing the female warrior to skip sideways to avoid tripping. Her careful timing was disrupted, and her coordinated attack with Zethkal fell apart. Jake immediately focused all his attention on the squad leader, rushing forward with an aggressive combination of strikes that drove the alien backward. Zethkal was skilled and experienced, but he had never faced an opponent who fought with such unconventional tactics. When Zethkal tried to regain the initiative with a powerful overhead strike, Jake used a technique called a sacrifice throw. He deliberately left himself partially open to attack, baiting the squad leader into overcommitting to his strike. Zethkal took the bait. He put all his strength behind the attack, certain that he could overwhelm the human with superior force. Instead, Jake redirected the alien's momentum and used a hip throw to send him crashing to the padded floor. The squad leader's thermal saber flew from his hand as he hit the ground. Jake caught it smoothly and added it to his collection. Nixthal found herself alone, facing a human who now held 5 energy weapons and had just defeated the 4 best warriors on the ship. She raised her thermal saber defensively, but her confidence was completely shattered. "I yield," she said quietly. Jake looked at her for a moment, then powered down all the thermal sabers and set them carefully on the floor. "Good fight," he said simply. The training bay was absolutely silent. Captain Vextar stood motionless on his platform, staring down at the impossible scene. 5 elite Corvan warriors, the pride of the ship's military force, had been systematically defeated by a single human using weapons he had never trained with before. Jake walked over to where Brackmore was still standing and offered his hand. "You all right?" The big alien looked at the offered hand with confusion, then slowly reached out and shook it. "I do not understand what happened," he admitted. "Different fighting styles?" Jake explained. "We all have things to learn from each other." But as he looked around at the shocked faces of the Corvan crew, Jake knew that the real lesson was just beginning. Captain Vextar descended from his observation platform with slow, deliberate steps. The entire training bay remained silent as the ship's commander approached the center of the combat circle where Jake stood surrounded by fallen thermal sabers and defeated warriors. "Explain," the captain said simply. Jake looked up at the towering alien. "Explain what, sir?" "How a primitive human defeated my best squad in single combat using weapons he has never trained with." Before Jake could answer, Zethkal struggled to his feet. The squad leader's pride was clearly wounded along with his body. "It was luck," he declared loudly. "Beginner's fortune combined with our overconfidence. It will not happen again." "You think so?" Captain Vextar asked, his yellow eyes never leaving Jake's face. "Human, would you be willing to repeat this demonstration?" Jake felt the weight of hundreds of stares from the crowd of Corvan crew members. Word of the fight had spread quickly through the ship, and aliens were still arriving at the training bay to see the aftermath. "If ordered, sir." "Consider it an order," the captain replied. "But this time, squad leader Zethkal and warrior Nixthal will not hold back. They will fight as if their lives depend on victory." A murmur ran through the crowd. Practice combat was one thing, but what the captain was suggesting approached actual combat. Even with weapons set to training mode, serious injuries were possible when experienced warriors fought without restraint. Zethkal straightened his uniform and picked up his thermal saber. "With pleasure, Captain. I will show this human what real Corvan combat looks like." Nixthal hesitated. "Sir, if we fight without restraint, the human could be seriously hurt. Their bodies are much more fragile than ours." "The human accepted the challenge," Captain Vextar replied. "I assume he understands the risks." Jake picked up 2 thermal sabers from the floor and activated them. "I understand, sir." The crowd pressed closer to the combat circle, sensing that they were about to witness something significant. Other squad leaders and senior officers had arrived, including some aliens from species Jake did not recognize. This was no longer just a training exercise between squad mates. Zethkal and Nixthal took positions on opposite sides of the circle. Their movements were different now, more focused and predatory. The playful attitude from the first fight was completely gone, replaced by the deadly seriousness of warriors who felt their reputations were at stake. "Begin," Captain Vextar commanded. Both Corvans attacked simultaneously with lethal intent. Their thermal sabers moved in complex patterns, designed to overwhelm any defense through speed and coordination. These were techniques developed over centuries of warfare, tested in countless battles across the galaxy. Jake's response revealed something that the Corvans had never considered. While their fighting arts had evolved for formal duels and battlefield combat between armored opponents, human martial arts had developed under very different pressures. Humans had spent thousands of years learning to survive fights where they were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing opponents who wanted to kill them. Every human combat technique assumed the fight would be unfair, desperate, and dirty. There were no rules in human warfare except winning and staying alive. Jake used the training bay's walls to limit the angles of attack, positioning himself so that Zethkal and Nixthal could not both reach him simultaneously. When they tried to force him into the open, he threw one of his thermal sabers at the overhead lights, creating dramatic shadows that confused their Depth perception. The alien warriors had never encountered an opponent who treated the environment as a weapon. Corvan combat was based on honor and technique, not survival at any cost. Zethkal pressed forward aggressively, trying to use his superior reach and strength to overwhelm Jake's defenses. But Jake had learned long ago that trying to match a stronger opponent's power was a mistake. Instead, he used leverage and timing to turn the squad leader's attacks against him. When Zethkal committed to a powerful thrust, Jake sidestepped and grabbed the alien's extended arm. He applied a joint lock that hyperextended the elbow while simultaneously striking nerve points that caused temporary paralysis. The thermal saber fell from numb fingers. Nixthal tried to capitalize on Jake's momentary focus on her squad leader, attacking from his blind side with a technique that should have ended the fight immediately. But Jake had been tracking her position. Through sound and peripheral vision, skills developed through years of combat in hostile environments, he spun to meet her attack with a counter technique that caught her completely off guard. Instead of trying to block her strike, he trapped her weapon arm and used her own momentum to throw her to the ground. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs and sent her thermal saber skittering across the floor. The fight had lasted less than 2 minutes. Both elite Corvan warriors lay defeated on the training bay floor while Jake stood over them. Barely breathing hard, Captain Vexstar stared at the scene with obvious amazement. How is this possible? Jake powered down his thermal sabers and set them carefully aside. Different approach to fighting, sir. Kovans seem to focus on strength and honor. Humans focus on winning. Winning, the captain repeated slowly. Explain this concept. In human combat, there are no rules except survival, Jake said. We use whatever works. Environment, psychology, deception, leverage. The goal is not to demonstrate superior technique. The goal is to make sure the other guy does not get back up. Zethkal slowly climbed to his feet, his face showing confusion and something that might have been fear. You fight like a coward, using tricks and avoiding direct confrontation. I fight like someone who wants to live through the encounter, Jake replied calmly. Honor does not matter much if you are dead. But where is the glory in such methods? Nixtal asked from the floor. What is the point of victory without demonstrating your warrior's spirit? Jake thought about how to explain concepts that humans took for granted. On Earth, we have a saying. There are old warriors and bold warriors, but there are no old, bold warriors. The warrior who survives gets to fight another day and protect the people who depend on him. Captain Vexstar walked slowly around the combat circle, examining the scattered weapons and defeated squad members. These techniques you used? Are they common among human military forces? Basic level stuff, sir, Jake admitted. Any Marine recruit learns these in the first month of training. A shocked silence fell over the training bay. The implications of Jake's words were staggering. If basic human combat training could defeat elite Corvan warriors, what would happen when experienced human special forces encountered alien military units? Captain, one of the alien officers called from the crowd. If the humans fight like this, how did we ever consider them a weak species? Because we judged them by our own standards, Captain Vexstar replied thoughtfully. We looked at their size and strength and assumed those were the only factors that mattered in combat. Jake nodded. A lot of species seem to make that mistake, sir. Humans learned long ago that being the biggest or strongest does not guarantee victory. Intelligence, adaptability, and the willingness to do whatever it takes usually matter more. Brackmer, who had been silent since his earlier defeat, finally spoke up. Are all human warriors capable of such techniques? Most of them, Jake said. And the really dangerous ones are much better at it than I am. The crowd of Corvan crew members exchanged worried glances. They had spent years believing that their species represented the pinnacle of military effectiveness in the galaxy. The idea that humans might be superior warriors was almost impossible to accept, but the evidence lay scattered across the training bay floor in the form of their best fighters, defeated by techniques they had never seen or imagined. Captain Vexstar made a decision that would change everything. Human, I am reassigning you to active combat status. You will train my warriors in these human fighting methods. Sir? Jake asked. If one human can defeat my best squad, imagine what an army of humans could accomplish, the captain said grimly. The Galactic Defense Coalition needs to understand what kind of allies we have gained. As Jake looked around at the shocked faces of the alien crew, he realized that the demonstration had accomplished more than anyone had expected. The Corvans were no longer seeing humans as weak primitives who had stumbled into space travel. They were starting to understand that Earth's warriors might be the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy. Word of Jake's victory spread through the Valiant horizon faster than a computer virus. Within hours, every crew member on the ship had heard some version of the story. By evening, the details had grown considerably in the telling. Some claimed Jake had defeated the entire squad in under 30 seconds. Others insisted he had fought blindfolded. A few whispered that he had used some kind of secret human technology. Jake found himself the center of attention wherever he went. Aliens who had previously ignored him now stopped to stare as he passed. Some looked afraid, others curious, and a few seemed almost respectful. The change was dramatic and uncomfortable. He was eating dinner in the ship's mess hall. When Captain Vexstar approached his table, the entire room fell silent as the commanding officer sat down across from the human. I have been reviewing the security footage from today's training exercise, the captain said without preamble. I have watched it 17 times. Jake swallowed his food carefully. Find anything interesting, sir? Several things, Captain Vexstar replied. First, your movements show training and experience that far exceed what we were told about human military capabilities. Second, you were clearly holding back during the demonstration. You could have seriously injured my warriors if you had chosen to do so. The exercise was meant to be educational, not harmful, Jake said. Educational indeed, the captain agreed. Tell me about human warfare, Lieutenant Morrison. Not the official reports we receive from your government, but the reality of how your species fights. Jake set down his eating utensil and considered his words carefully. Humans have been at war with each other for most of our recorded history, sir. We have fought with rocks, sticks, swords, guns, bombs, and everything in between. We have learned to kill effectively in every environment from underwater to outer space. And this experience translates to fighting other species? Combat is combat, Jake replied. The techniques that work against humans usually work against any humanoid opponent. Leverage points, nerve clusters, balance, and momentum. The basic principles are universal. Captain Vexstar nodded slowly. I have sent a report to Coalition Command describing today's events. I suspect they will want to reevaluate humanity's role in our military structure. Over the following days, Jake's status aboard the ship changed completely. Squad leader Zethkal, after overcoming his initial wounded pride, became genuinely interested in learning human combat techniques. He requested private training sessions where Jake could teach the squad new methods without the embarrassment of public instruction. Show me again how you controlled Brackmore's weapon arm, Zethkal said during one of these sessions. I have never seen a technique that could neutralize such a strength advantage. Jake demonstrated the joint lock slowly, explaining how leverage and precise application of force could overcome raw power. The key is not to fight their strength directly. You redirect it and use it against them. Brackmore, despite being the first to fall during the demonstration, proved to be the most eager student. His massive size had always been his primary advantage. In combat, and learning techniques that did not depend on physical strength opened up entirely new possibilities. Human fighting is like solving a puzzle, he observed after successfully performing a disarm technique on Tinder. Each opponent has weaknesses that can be exploited if you know where to look. Nixthal was more analytical in her approach. She studied human anatomy and physiology, trying to understand how a smaller, seemingly weaker species had developed such effective combat methods. Your bone density is lower than ours, but your muscle fiber efficiency is remarkably high, she told Jake, and your reaction times are faster than we initially measured. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Jake explained. We may not be the strongest or fastest predators, but we are very good at adapting to new situations and outlasting our opponents. Kelvas, the squad's technology specialist, became fascinated with human weapon design. Your projectile weapons are simple but effective, he admitted during one of their armory sessions. I had not considered that reliability might be more important than sophistication in combat situations. A gun that fires every time you pull the trigger is better than an advanced weapon that jams when you need it most, Jake agreed, the real test of their new relationship came 2 weeks later when the Valiant Horizon received an emergency distress call. A coalition research station on the planet Kepler-7 was under attack by raiders, and Strike Team Alpha was assigned to the rescue mission. As they prepared for deployment, Zethkal made an announcement that surprised everyone on the squad. The human will take point position on this mission. Brackmore looked confused. Squad leader, are you certain? Point position is the most dangerous assignment. It is also the position that requires the most skill and tactical awareness, Zethkal replied. Jake has proven that he possesses both qualities. Jake felt a strange mixture of pride and nervousness as he checked his equipment. This would be his first real combat mission with the squad, and their lives would depend on his decisions and abilities. During the drop to the planet's surface, Nixthal spoke over the team communication system. Jake, what is your assessment of the tactical situation? Jake studied the intelligence reports on his tactical display. 12 to 15 raiders armed with energy weapons and light armor. They have taken defensive positions inside the research facility. Standard assault would result in heavy casualties and possible hostage deaths. Recommended approach? Zethkal asked. Infiltration and misdirection? Jake replied immediately. We split into 2 teams. One creates a diversion at the main entrance, while the other enters through the ventilation system. The raiders will focus on the obvious threat while we take them from behind. That plan violates standard Corvin assault doctrine, Kelvas pointed out. Standard doctrine gets people killed when the enemy expects it, Jake said. The goal is to win the fight, not to follow tradition. The mission proceeded exactly as Jake had planned. His human training in unconventional warfare proved invaluable in the close-quarters combat inside the research facility. The raiders, who were experienced in fighting Corvan forces, had no idea how to respond to human tactics. Within 20 minutes, all the raiders were neutralized with no casualties among the research station personnel or Strike Team Alpha. As they prepared to return to the ship, Zethkal approached Jake with something in his hand. It was a thermal saber, but not a practice weapon. This was a real combat blade with decorative engraving along the handle. This belonged to my predecessor, the squad leader said formally. It is traditional to pass it to the warrior who proves himself worthy of carrying it. Jake accepted the weapon with genuine surprise. Squad leader, I am honored. You have earned the respect of every warrior on this ship, Zethkal replied. More importantly, you have taught us that strength comes in many forms. We judged humans by our own standards and found you wanting. That was our mistake, not your weakness. On the flight back to the Valiant Horizon, Jake looked out at the stars and thought about how much had changed since his arrival. He had come to learn about alien combat techniques and prove that humans could be valuable allies. Instead, he had taught the aliens about human warfare and earned a place among some of the galaxy's most elite warriors. But more than that, he had helped bridge the gap between 2 very different species. The Corvans were beginning to understand that physical strength was not the only measure of a warrior's worth, and Jake had learned that respect, once earned, could overcome even the deepest prejudices. As Strike Team Alpha returned to their ship, they were no longer a Corvan squad with a human attachment. They were something new, a truly integrated unit that combined the best of both species. Military traditions. Captain Vexstar met them in the hangar bay. Mission report, he requested. Complete success, sir, Zethkal replied. All objectives achieved with no friendly casualties. The humans' tactical planning was instrumental in our victory. The captain nodded approvingly. Excellent. I have received new orders from Coalition Command. Strike Team Alpha is being transferred to Special Operations status. You will be working directly with human military units on classified missions. Jake felt a surge of excitement. What kind of missions, sir? The kind where human unconventional warfare expertise will be essential. Captain Vexstar replied with something that might have been a smile. Congratulations, Lieutenant Morrison. You have officially changed the way the galaxy thinks about human warriors. As Jake looked around at his squad mates, he saw something in their eyes that had not been there when he first arrived. It was not fear or amusement or condescension. It was the recognition that warriors give to other warriors. Regardless of species or origin, he had found his place among the stars.